This is a good book. These are fairy tales. Did you know that? We read one the other night, but I think you were already asleep. Or what was the situation?
No. They went to the party.
Oh, that's right. The night they went to the party, Hunter and I read one of these books.
Because no boys allowed to come.
That's right.
Like they know girls allowed.
Well, that's right. That was a party for Sheila. Cheyenne, I know you don't feel good, see, baby. Come on.
Because that was her baby. No, boys could come.
Well, sometimes girls have to do things by themselves, and sometimes boys do things by themselves, too.
Only boys allowed, and only girls allowed sometimes.
Sometimes. Cheyenne, what's wrong, see?
What's that one?
All right, now let's settle in, okay? All right, we got new batteries, new tape player, my boy, right? The brave little tailor, the three spinners. I got to try to find a good story in here.
Yeah.
Ooh, there's a witch.
I want to Hansel and Gretel.
Oh, this is a story of Snow White. Do you want to hear about Snow White and the witch? What do you think, Cheyenne?
This is the bad.
That's a bad witch.
Who's that?
Who?
Her.
That's the witch. Actually, it's the queen who pretends to be somebody else. It says, once upon a time, a certain queen sat by the window sewing. And as she looked out at the snow, she pricked her finger with a needle, and it bled. Blood fell out of her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. And she gazed thoughtfully at the red dots, and she said, I wish my little daughter may be as white as the snow, as red as blood, and as black as the ebony window frame. And not long after this, a baby was born to the queen, and the child's skin was as white as snow, and her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. And so the queen called her Snow White. You hurt your finger tonight, didn't we? We had to fix it up. What did Daddy do?
Put a Band-Aid on.
Put a Band-Aid. We had to pull off the old skin, though, didn't we? Hunter wasn't too into that, were you, my boy? Okay, well, then the queen called Snow White, and she became ill and died. And so the next year, the king married a woman who was very beautiful, but so proud and selfish that she could not bear to think of anyone in the world being prettier than her. She said, I want to be the prettiest woman. Oh, do that again, Tara. Mama's in here, and look what she's doing. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. Look at that. Mama's flashing. Oh, Daddy's going to follow her right out of the room. Her greatest treasure was, Mom, have you done all those lunch things upstairs so I can just capture you and run away with you?
Yeah. Right.
Mama, how come you took off your underwear?
Oh, she's washing her underwear.
And she has no underwear on.
I guess not.
And you saw her back.
Oh, don't look.
I looked at her back.
Oh, don't look. Anyway, this nasty lady would look in the mirror and she would say, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And the mirror, it was a mirror, like your mirror right in there, only the mirror would talk. And the mirror said, the magic mirror tells you true, the fairest in the land is you. You don't like her?
I only like the Snow White and the boy.
Right.
I just like
Well, I said,
Snow White and the boy.
As the years passed, Snow White grew more and more beautiful. And when she was 7 years old, she was fairer than the queen herself. And then one day when the queen went to consult the mirror, she said, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And the mirror went, The magic mirror tells you true. Snow White is prettier than you. Uh-oh. And when the queen heard this, she went, She got very mad and nasty, and she called the huntsman. And she said, You take Snow White out into the forest and kill her and cut out her heart and bring it back to me. And oh no, the woodsman didn't want to do that. And so he took Snow White out into the forest. But when he lifted up his sword to get her, he couldn't do it. He could not do it. He says, I cannot hurt you, my pretty child. But he says, but I can't take you back to the queen. She'll kill us both. So he left Snow White deep in the forest with all the trees. And he killed a deer, and he took the deer's heart back. And he said to the queen, he had this bloody heart, and he said, here's Snow White's heart. Poor Snow White now. She was all alone in the woods, and it was dark, and there were tall trees. What would you think?
I would go with you.
You'd stay with me? I'd stay with you, too. Anyway, she didn't know where to find shelter. And so she was moving along, and as it was starting to really get dark, she spied a little cottage, which is a little house.
Yeah, I know.
And you knew that? Okay, well, I didn't know. And then she went into the cottage, and it was so nice in there. Everything about the cottage was small. No, not cottage cheese. It's a little house, a little cabin. Everything in there was very neat and clean. And on the table was spread a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates, and 7 little forks, and 7 little knives, and 7 little spoons, and 7 little cups. And against the wall stood 7 little beds. Now she was very hungry, so Snow White ate and drank, and taking a little from each plate so as not to eat up all the food from any one. And after that she thought that she would lie down, so she tried each one of the beds, and one was too long, and another was too short, and another bed was too hard, and another bed was too soft, but at last the 7th bed suited her, and she lay down and she fell fast asleep on the bed.
Which one was that?
I don't know which one it was. But presently, the 7 dwarfs came home. 7 little dwarfs who worked in the mountains. And they dug gold in the mountains with their pickaxes. They went up into the mountains to find gold. And they lighted their 7 lamps and saw immediately that all was not right. The first dwarf said, well, who's been sitting on my stool? And the second dwarf said, well, who's been eating from my plate? And the third little dwarf said, well, someone has been nibbling my bread. And the fourth one said, who's been cutting with my knife? And the 5th dwarf said, well, someone has been using my fork. And the 6th one said, who's been eating my porridge? And the 7th one said, well, who has been drinking my milk? And then the first one looked around and he said, well, who's been lying on my bed? And the rest came running to see, and each in turn cried out that somebody had been on his bed. And then the 7th dwarf said, the 7th dwarf saw Snow White lying there on the bed. And so he called his brothers to come quickly. And they held their lamps high because it was kind of dark, and they had lamps, with candles in them. And they held them up high so they could see her. And they saw Snow White. And they cried in one voice, what a lovely child. And they were delighted with her beauty. And so they decided, let's not wake her up. Should we let her sleep? What do you think, Cheyenne? Do you think the dwarf should let her sleep? Well, they did. They decided to let her sleep. And so the 7 dwarfs, the 7th dwarf, who would normally have slept there in that bed, he slept with his brothers, an hour with each, so that Snow White might sleep on undisturbed. And in the morning, Snow White woke up. And at first she was afraid of the little men. But they were kind to her, and she soon overcame her fear, and she told them her story about how the bad queen had kicked her out, and the huntsman was supposed to kill her and take her heart. And so the little dwarfs, they said, oh, you poor thing. And they said, why don't you stay in our house? You could stay here and you can cook and you can wash our clothes. You could just stay in the cottage while we go off and we dig our gold up in the mountain. So they're going to have Snow White stay. You like that?
Yeah.
She's going to live there with the 7 dwarfs in the little house. And so each day the dwarfs went out to their work, and they also dug for silver. They dug for the gold. And Snow White maintained at home. She maintained everything in the house for them. And every day the dwarfs warned her, "The queen will soon find out where you are, so take care and let no one in." Well, the bad queen, now that she thought Snow White was dead, believed that she was certainly the loveliest lady in the land, and so, going to her looking glass, she said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And what do you think the mirror said?
What?
What do you think it's going to say?
I don't know.
It's going to tell him Snow White's the fairest one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the mirror said, "The magic mirror tells you true. Snow White is lovelier than you. She's living still in a forest glen, and she dwells with 7 little men." And then the queen was mad. She was so mad she smashed things and crashed things and yelled and screamed and slapped and hit and ran around and just like this. Oh, she's just crashing around in her castle because she is so mad that Snow White is prettier. Oh, no. And she knew the huntsman had not really killed Snow White, and she could not bear to think that anyone alive could be prettier than her. She wouldn't have it. And so she disguised herself like an old woman, and she put on a mask. And she went up into the hills where the dwarfs lived. And so she came to where the dwarfs lived, and she knocked on the door. Okay, you guys do it too. You guys knock. Okay, good sound effects, you guys. She knocked on the door. "I have fine wares to sell." Now Snow White looked out the window and said, "Good morning, good woman. What have you to sell?" "I have some good wares to sell. I've got laces and ribbons of all colors." "Oh, I'll let the lady in," thought Snow White. "She seems to be an honest soul." And so Snow White unlocked the door and let her in. But who is it really?
The witch.
Oh, yuck. Who's coming in the house? Cheyenne.
The witch.
Uh-oh. "Bless me," said the old woman. "How lovely you look. Oh, let me lace it with one of my new laces." And so Snow White did not dream of any harm coming to her, and she let the old woman do as she wished, and she pulled the laces so tight that Snow White lost her breath, and she fell down and thought she was dead.
But she was supposed to give her an apple.
And then Snow White kind of got back up, and the witch gave her an apple. And she said, "This is for you, 'cause you're a nice girl." And she hurried away. And Snow White thought, "This is wonderful." And she took a bite. And what happened?
She just fell down.
She fell down, didn't she? How do you know this story?
Yeah, I just know it.
Did you ever see the cartoon of it?
No.
It'll come back out again pretty soon. Now, Daddy will take you. Anyway, so she bit the apple, and she fell over as if she were dead, but she wasn't. And when the dwarfs returned that evening, they cried because there was Snow White on the floor, and they couldn't get her to move. And they lifted her up, and when they found there was some apple in her mouth, they took out the piece of apple, and she began to breathe a little bit. And the old woman, the dwarf said, "The old woman was the queen herself, so be more careful next time." Oh, no, wait a minute, Hunter. Daddy's changing the story here for you, but actually, it wasn't the apple the first time, because they talked about how it locked her in, you know. But anyway, I guess we'll pretend it's the apple here now. And they went, it was the old woman who did it, I'll bet. But Snow White wouldn't wake up. She would not wake up. And they tried and tried and tried to get her up. And they just thought, what are we going to do? So they pressed their lips to her, and they were so afraid that she was dead. And they lifted her up and combed her hair, and they washed her face with wine and water, but Snow White would not move, would she?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. And so they laid her down on the bed. And all 7 dwarfs watched over her for 3 days, and she looked so lifelike that they put her in a glass coffin so that they might look at her still. And they wrote her name on it in gold and placed it on the hill. And one of the dwarfs always sat by it and watched. And thus Snow White lay for a long, long time, looking as if she were asleep. And at last a prince came through, and he was riding a big, pretty horse, and he saw Snow White. And he fell in love with her at first sight, and he begged the dwarfs to give her to him. And then he offered the dwarfs money and earnestly prayed them to let him take her with him. But they said, we shall not part with her for all the gold in the world. But at last, however, they took pity on him and consented. And he called his servants to lift the coffin. And in doing so, one of them stumbled and fell, and the jolt knocked a piece of the apple from Snow White's mouth, and she awakened, crying out, where am I? And the prince answered, you were safe with me. And then, telling her what had happened, he said, I love you better than all the world, Snow White. Please come to my father's palace with me and be my bride. And so Snow White consented and went to the home with the prince. And his parents loved her at once, and everything was prepared for her wedding with great pomp and splendor. And among the rest, Snow White's old enemy, the wicked queen, was invited to the feast. And as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the mirror and she said, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And what's the mirror going to say?
Sing, sing.
The mirror said, the magic mirror tells you true, the bride is lovelier than you. And when she heard this, the queen turned red with rage and anger, but her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not resist going to see the bride. And when she saw that it was none other than Snow White, who she thought had been dead for a long time, she choked with passion and fell over and died herself. But Snow White and the prince lived long and reigned happily ever after. And she lived in the castle, and she was very happy. And she was a very kind ruler, and she was nice to all her people.
Another one.
She was really nice to everybody, wasn't she?
No, another one.
No, that was a long one. My Daddy was supposed to read a short story here tonight because it was late, and now it's really late, isn't it? I love you too, kids. I love Hunter and I love Shy. I love Shy and I love Hunt. 1, 2, 2, do, 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 do. Let's count down. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10, and 11.